mean, this is, Judy, as you know, this is what it's all about. It is one life at a time. You know, we, all of you in this room, I know focus on how we do it at scale and the efficacy of a delivery of a healthcare system in this country, which should be open and equitable to everyone, and it isn't. And you all in this room are doing something about it. I'm obviously looking to do my part. But it comes down to often just one life that matters, because every single life matters. So I'm proud to be in this room with you all and being honored with this wonderful group, and Christine and the Harlem Capital guys. We got some work to do, fellas, and we're going to get it done. But I got to tell you, it's actually exciting to be here with you all to actually change the world.
Great, thank you. We first met in 2013, and we started a conversation that's still continuing about cancer disparities and the appallingly poor outcomes for African Americans, particularly in breast and prostate cancer. And since that time, you've made substantial contributions to research and programs that have looked at the root causes and trying to change those terrible statistics. Have you found anything that you think is really a way forward? What's working?
There's a number of things. When I view problems, and we all know the statistics, so I won't recount them of the multiples of deaths that African American men have, and 40+% higher incidence of breast cancer and death of African American women. But what I've come to realize, and I'm no expert in this area, but I've learned from experts. People like Mike Milken, who's sitting here, who runs Prostate Cancer Foundation. What I've learned is the power of organizational capacity. That's the first thing. And I've learned the importance of partnering with, organizations that are delivering health care, organizations that are doing the actual work, the genomic work, the oncology work, organizations to distribute the information into the communities, and what I call the local ground game. All of that's important. So the thing that I have learned, it's not just one group. It's not a federal government or a state government. It is people in this room. It's a community. It's an ecosystem that solves these problems. We need leaders in these ecosystems to put capital, organizational resources, thought, research, and then delivery mechanisms in place. And tying that together, I think, is where folks like me who are philanthropists can have an effect. We can have an effect to put these organizations in touch with each other and stitch together, the greatest minds and capacity to actually change the outcomes.
Absolutely. Working together, I think, is really, from my work in the breast cancer movement, has shown where you can really move the needle. But I think we would both agree that it's not if we will change those terrible statistics, but when and how soon. And I think it's the collective will that will really accelerate that.
Yeah, so I agree. Judy, one of the things that we've talked about is, how do we get more capital into the space? And a lot has to do with thinking about getting philanthropists and governments to work together, public-private partnerships. You've been head of this foundation and other foundations, and how do we get everyone engaged? And so, what I try to encourage is the communication and saying, listen, I know every one of you has what I call you're baking your own loaf of bread that you think's the best one, but what you'll find is if you work together, you can actually be more effective, quote unquote, feed more people in that context and actually improve our outcomes in a shorter period of time. And so encouraging philanthropists to actually take the lead role in this, I think, is a big part of what these organizations need to also do.
Yeah, great. Let's keep doing it.
Yeah.
Last week I had the opportunity to be at a dinner where I met an African-American woman, physician, who is very accomplished, and she told me about growing up in Huntsville, Alabama, and going to segregated schools. And I asked her about what it was that really motivated her, coming from that kind of background, which we would previously have called disadvantage. What really put her on the trajectory that she's on today? And she said something very interesting. She said her mother always told her and her 5 brothers and sisters that if you know your history, then you know your power. And Robert, I know that you've made an extraordinary gift to the new Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, which has underwritten the Explore Your Family History Center. So immediately thought about you when she said that, and it's an opportunity for African Americans to share their family histories and to digitally preserve those stories. And we know how important those stories are to who we are and where we go. So can you tell me a little bit about what your thinking was in setting up that center?
Yeah, so I think, one of the more important lessons of America is we all contribute to the fabric that is in America, and as many know, it isn't often that the articulation of that fabric is done in the words of those who contributed that fabric. So, the center is designed so that you can contribute in a digital format or analog, converted to digital format, your family's history, their contributions to their community, their neighborhood, and, wherever, you move from. And, the dynamic there, of course, is, the more we know about each other and what our contributions are, there's less misunderstanding about who we are as Americans. The fact of the matter is this is the greatest country on the planet. That from time to time we go through these divisions of race and class and social structure that aren't beneficial to any of us. I look at this great economic structure that is America that says one of the few places where you actually can protect property and personal property and have the ability to actually start businesses, and part of it is getting access to capital so people can start businesses so they can serve their communities with businesses that serve their communities. And for me, there's a great history of that in the African American community in America, but not many young people know about it. So these young people consume so much information on these devices that we all call smartphones, which are really little mini computers. And so why not give them that access and that history at their fingertips, give them a chance to digitize and learn their own family history through that context, contribute it into a place where we'll be held forever, and from that the narratives of who we are as a great society of Americans can now unfold. So that's the point of it. And over time, I hope that as we get more information and data, that can then be used to actually reconnect people with family members they may not know, or lineage that they may have been disconnected from. So that's the point.
Great. And you've told me a little bit about your personal history.
Yeah.
What is it in your family history that contributed to your success?
Yeah, it's interesting. As you know, I gave a commencement speech at Morehouse, and no one really listened to the speech till the last minute and a half.
That's right.
But if you actually go and listen, I think there's been 2 viewers. I know my mother watched it once. But there have been, I think, 2 viewers who have actually watched the whole speech. I talk about this whole concept of Bus 13. And where I grew up, I'm the first person in my family to actually have all my rights as an American citizen. I was born in 1962, and Civil Rights Act in 1965. And so I was born in a world and in an environment where they were looking to actually create equal access to education. And in Denver at the time, the way they were going to do it was desegregating the schools and using busing. And at the time, they, of course, purchased a lot of buses. Some, idiot decided they didn't like it, so they burned like 1/3 of the buses. So there were fewer buses to force this busing to go along. And so in my neighborhood, only 1 bus came in my neighborhood. And I grew up in, basically in an all-black neighborhood. So it was only about 5 blocks of us kids who actually could fit on that bus. And so from first grade, I got bused across town to a school that was much better resourced in terms of teachers, capacity, facilities, supplies, books, all those sort of things. And it changed, I know, the direction of my life, because when I look at the 40, 50 kids who I was on the bus with, we have a very different outcome than kids who were 1 block away who didn't get on that bus. And if there is no greater, experiment, that's it. And so access to education, like we're talking about here, is access to healthcare. And it has a huge difference. And, you know, I look at all the kids who were on that bus, and they were all highly productive citizens contributing in the society, in our society, in ways not only, you know, income and wealth, but also delivering back as politicians, as doctors, et cetera, that were all on that one bus. So when I think about the early part of my life, what changed that trajectory was access to high quality education early. And every child in America should have access to high quality education, and we need to change that.
Yeah. You know, it's not about ability, it's about opportunity.
Right.
Really, that makes a
It's the
huge
on-ramps of
difference.
opportunity. You think about it as how do you, you know, my gift to Morehouse is just, I wanted people to understand, look, there's 400 young African-American men that now have a burden alleviated, and their families have this burden alleviated. And I tease them in some respects, but I want 1/4 of them to become brilliant chemical engineers, because I know a few of those. I want 1/4 to learn how to program and, you know, be computer science majors and actually go back into the communities and teach all these young kids, you know, how to become digitally literate at an early age. I want 1/4 of them to become doctors. And I want that 1/4 to become doctors to deliver those services back into their community. And that last 1/4, I actually want to become politicians, because you all know the policy is important to support the delivery of a number of these things that we're looking for to change the way that our society looks. We have, I think, one more great chance here to change the nature of the American society, and it is now. And so we need to liberate more people to go make those changes. So I was just, you know, again, looking to do my part in that.
Great, wonderful. And you know, we're investing in the children of East Harlem. There are a lot of East Harlem parents here, right? Where are you?
All right.
Yeah, okay. So we want to keep the hopes and dreams for their children alive through our work.
And there's great access. I was actually, one of my friends started an organization called Scratch. So it's scratch.mit.edu. Free programming to learn how for kids from, they started kind of 7 years old to 14, 15. But every one of you parents should be getting your kids on those sort of platforms so that they can actually learn how to, I call upload software, not download software. So those are the dynamics that are critical as a community that we need to make sure we drive that forward. And again, it is free. And to me, you know, to the extent it's not taught in the schools, we need to figure out ways to deliver it into the communities anyway.
Well, you are certainly being recognized as one of the foremost philanthropists in this country, and certainly of our age. And the Giving Pledge, the first African American to sign the Giving Pledge, Morehouse, that incredible gift that made international headlines, your African American Museum, your support of that, it's just been amazing. But what is your approach to giving, and what do you feel, what do you want to accomplish beyond just giving a gift? What do you think it can have effects?
It's interesting. As you all know, I'm chairman of Carnegie Hall, and Sterling has had a chance to play there. And I look at someone like Andrew Carnegie, and a lot of people don't really understand what his life was, but when he sold his steel business, ultimately, and you got to think about this, on equivalent dollars, he would have made $331 billion. So that's like 3 times what Bezos has today, just to give you some sense. And he gave it all away. He built 2,500 libraries. Okay, he actually supported now and built 22 different institutions. You all know of Carnegie Hall and Carnegie Mellon. There are another 20. He's a science foundation, a foundation for ethics, et cetera. When I think about that dynamic of being able to change the entire course of a country, you know, I think about, okay, what is my role? I've had the great opportunity to get into an economic system that is capitalism in America, use some intellectual property and drive value. And so I think my role is to figure out the platforms that can actually liberate the human spirit. So when I think about music, when I think about, you know, philanthropy in healthcare, when I think about it in teaching young people how to code, exposing young people to the outdoors. We were just chatting at my ranch. I get over 10,000 kids a year at my ranch because what I want to do is liberate their spirits, because there is nothing more beautiful than a liberated human spirit. So that's really what my goal is.
Wow, thank you. Amazing.
No, thank you.
And of course, we all know that you have been very successful in business. So,
We made a nickel or two, yes.
so as a respected and influential business leader, what's the role of business in helping us move toward a more just society?
I think business has a role and it is an important one. You know, the dynamic around, and I like to use the word stakeholders. You know, I have a number of shareholders in the form of limited partners, investors. My investment group now, we cover, I think the number today is, 45% or so of the public service workers. So these are policemen and municipal workers and firefighters, et cetera, and 50% of the teachers, just to give you a sense, have some exposure to my funds. And that's my first duty, is to ensure that I provide the highest quality pension support that what we can provide to those pension plans, and we do that with what I point is at the lowest loss ratio. So we are focused on driving that as first. But the second part of that is the other stakeholders that I deal with, which are my employees. And part of my job is to ensure that they have ability to access training, and I have it at multiple layers. I have a thing called Vista University, where any one of my 77,000 employees can actually get a nano degree in artificial intelligence or machine learning to help drive their own capabilities in the world of enterprise software. And I've got training programs for the C-suite, for the 2 levels below the CEO, for mid-level managers, to entry level, to how do we actually do the work to onboard people and on-the-job training. And then we just launched a new platform called InternX, and our goal there is to get more African Americans and women into technology through a platform that you sign up, and we do some job readiness, and then for the employer, so every employer, E&Y I know is in here, we've been great partners of ours for years. Bank of America have been great partners of ours, to actually provide the sorts of internships, because that changed my life. And what we want to do is really match, those students who really need to get some exposure to business with organizations that have a chance to take I call it a free look. I mean, interns don't cost that much, but a look at these folks, and then advance them into a society and an economic structure that can benefit them personally as well as their communities. Because what you do find is when you employ people and they're gainfully employed, they drive a lot of that value back into the communities and stabilize their communities. So that's the virtuous cycle that I think businesses need to spend time investing in that role.
And I think there's a role for nonprofit organizations like ours to take in interns and really, teach them more about and show them career directions that they might not have ever imagined.
And efficient delivery of philanthropic dollars. I mean, that's, if you look at philanthropists, that's what they're looking for. What are the efficient delivery mechanisms that, at scale, that are repeatable, that are sustainable? I mean, the other part of it is truly creating sustainable ecosystems such that, you're not doing something once, it affects one person, but you're doing something that has the ability to scale for if not years, decades, which is really the point.
Thank you. Well, I know we don't have a lot of time, and our conversation is standing between
them and the after party, right?
And dessert.
I know my fraternity brother's like, hey man, we got a rule about this after party thing.
But
so I got it. I understand. Yeah.
But I do have one other question for you. Since the first time I met you, you've struck me as incredibly optimistic. And it's really hard sometimes to get out of bed with the situation as it is in our country today and be optimistic.
Yeah.
So, we talked about the hopes and dreams for the children of East Harlem, but each of us has hopes and dreams for our children and our children's children. So tell me a little bit about why you're so optimistic.
Yeah, when you just asked that question, I thought about it, and the first thing that came to my mind was my grandfather. And he lived to be about 95 years old, and every time I talked to him or saw him, he always had a sparkle. He had a sparkle in his eye, and he was just always thinking about, okay, there's a whole lot of things you can't do anything about, but what you should focus on is doing things, the things you can do something about. And that's what I think about, you know, and I think about it when I look at my kids, and, you know, there's things, and I'll talk to my daughters and, you know, about what's going on as they're, you know, becoming, you know, young adults, and, you know, the things that they're dealing with and their pain, and I try to communicate to them, listen, some of those things you can't do anything about, but the things you can control, you know, give it everything you have, and, you know, beyond try your hardest, do it with a, you know, with an intent to actually make a difference. And if you do that, I think it'll keep you optimistic.
It's fabulous. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, Judith,
and
thank you.
I have to tell you, as a physician, I hope that your optimism is infectious.
Oh, thank
so
you.
thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thanks. Thank you all.
Thank you.